In the global phosphorus cycle, the lithospheric phase is predominant, whereas in nitrogen cycle, atmospheric phase is more important. Sulfur, by contrast, has atmospheric and lithospheric phases of similar magnitude. 3 natural biogeochemical processes release sulfur to the atmosphere. The formation of the volatile compound dimethyl sulfide. Anaerobic respiration by sulfate-reducing bacteria, and scent volcanic activity. The weathering of rocks provides about half the sulfur draining off the land into rivers and lakes, the remainder deriving from atmospheric sources. The available sulfur is taken up by plants, passed along food chains and, via decomposition processes, becomes available again to plants. The combustion of fossil fuels is a major human activity to the global sulfur cycle. L atmosphere degree. Volcanic 4. So, from activity burning of SO, fossil fuels. Terrestrial 7. Community, S shocked face and Y, center HS human activities. DMS. Water. In rivers, lakes, pipe, soil, and oceans. Rock. Aquatic. Communities. Ocean. Sediments I3. Figure 7.15, sulfur cycle. Carbon cycle. Photosynthesis and respiration are the two opposing processes that drive the global carbon cycle. It is predominantly a gaseous cycle, with Colorado as the main vehicle of flux between the atmosphere, hydrosphere and biota. Terrestrial plants use atmospheric Colorado as their carbon source for photosynthesis, whereas aquatic plants use atmospheric Colorado as their carbon source for photosynthesis, whereas aquatic plants use dissolved carbonates, i.e., carbon from the hydrosphere. In addition, carbon finds its way into inland waters and oceans as bicarbonate resulting from weathering of calcium-rich rocks such as limestone and chalk. Respiration by plants, animals and microorganisms releases the carbon locked in photosynthetic products back to the atmospheric and hydrospheric carbon compartments. 395. Life Sciences Admin. Biotech. EAV. Ecology. CO, dissolves. TLDINT Centco, combustion uptake in one of fossil fuels photosynthesis. Respirat. Terrestrial paration land. Communities 5, clearance. L organic carbon, organic CA human activities. In runoff. In rivers, lakes T soil, and oceans photosynthesis. And organic uptake. Aquatic. Communities V. Extraction _ of fossil fuels. Cucian. Sediments. Figure 7.16, carbon cycle. To summarize. In the flow of energy and inorganic nutrients through the ecosystem, a few generalizations can be made. 1. The ultimate source of energy for most ecosystems is the sun. 2. The ultimate fate of energy in ecosystems is for it to be lost as heat. 3. Energy and nutrients are passed from organism to organism through the food chain as one organism eats another. 4. Decomposers remove the last energy from the remains of organisms. 5. Inorganic nutrients are cycled, energy is not. Decomposition. Decomposition is defined as the gradual disintegration of dead organic matter and is brought about by both physical and biological agencies. Decomposition by biological agents is an oxidative process in which complex, energy-rich molecules being broken down by saprotrophs, decomposers and detritivores into CO, water and inorganic nutrients. The process of decomposition usually starts with decomposers, bacteria and fungi. When a plant or animal dies, it leaves behind nutrients and energy in the organic material that comprised its body. Scavenge. Gear and detritivores may feed on the carcasses or litter, but they will inevitably leave behind a considerable amount of unused energy and nutrients. Unused energy and nutrients will be present both in the unconsumed portions, bones, feathers or fur in the case of animals, wood and other indigestible litter in the case of plants, and in the feces of the scavengers and detritivores. Decomposers complete decomposition by breaking down this remaining organic matter. Decomposers eventually convert all organic matter into carbon dioxide, which they respire, and nutrients. This releases raw nutrients such as nitrogen, phosphorus, and magnesium in a form usable to plants and algae. This process resupplies nutrients to the ecosystem, in turn allowing for greater primary production. WA. Life Sciences Admin. Ecology. Major ecosystem. Aquatic ecosystem. Aquatic ecosystems are commonly categorized on the basis of whether the water is moving, streams, river basins or still ponds, lakes, large lakes, and whether the water is fresh, salty, oceans, or brackish estuaries. Marine ecosystem. Marine ecosystems are part of the Earth's aquatic ecosystem. They include oceans, estuaries, salt marshes, lagoons, some tropical ecosystems, such as mangrove forests and coral reefs, rocky, subtidal ecosystems, and shores. The main difference between this and other aquatic ecosystems is its salt content larger than that of freshwater. Oceans represent the largest and most diverse of the ecosystems. Oceans are divided into numerous regions depending on the physical and biological conditions of these areas. The major zones in oceans are littoral, neritic, pelagic, and benthic. The littoral, or intertidal zone is the shoreline between land and open sea. The open ocean is called the pelagic zone and the area underneath the pelagic zone is called the benthic zone, or deep sea. The deepest part of the ocean is called the abyssal zone. The neritic zone is a continental sheaf, extending outward to its edge to a water depth of about 200 meters. The pelagic zone, which includes all open ocean regions, can be subdivided into further regions categorized by phytoabundance. The photic zone covers the oceans from surface level to 200 meters down. This is the region where the photosynthesis most commonly occurs and therefore contains the largest biodiversity in the ocean. Littoral zone. L. Neritic zone, pelagic zone. Photic zone, epipelagic zone. O. 200 meters, 200 meters. C. Mesopelagic zone. 200, 1000 m. Aphotic zone. Figure 7.17, zonation and marine ecosystem. Coral reefs are aragonite structures produced by living organisms, found in marine waters with little to no nutrients in the water. In most reefs, the predominant organisms are stony corals, colonial cnidarians that secrete an exoskeleton of calcium carbonate. The accumulation of skeletal material produces a massive calcareous formation that supports the living corals and a great variety of other animal and plant life. Although corals are found both in temperate and tropical waters, shallow water reefs are formed only in its zone extending at most from 30 degrees north to 30 degrees south of the equator. The Great Barrier Reef, largest coral reef system in the world. 397. Life Sciences Admin. Ecology. Mangroves generally are composed of trees and shrubs that grow in saline coastal habitats in the tropics and subtropics. A mangrove is a plant in Mangal or mangrove forest is a plant community and habitat where mangroves thrive. They are found in tidal areas, and as such have a high degree of salinity. Areas where mangals occur include estuaries and marine shorelines. An estuary is a semi-enclosed coastal body of water with one or more rivers or streams flowing into it, and with a free connection to the open sea. Estuaries are often associated with high rates of biological productivity. Plants in mangals are diverse but all are able to exploit their habitat, the intertidal zone, by developing physiological adaptations to overcome the problems of anoxia, high salinity and frequent tidal inundation. About 110 species have been identified as belonging to the mangal. Each species has its own capabilities and solutions to these problems. This may be the primary reason why, on some shorelines, mangrove tree species show distinct zonation. Small environmental variations within a mangal may lead to greatly differing methods of coping with the environment. Therefore, the mix of species at any location within the intertidal zone is partly determined by the tolerances of individual species to physical conditions, like tidal inundation and salinity, but may also be influenced by other factors such as predation of plant seedlings by crabs. Freshwater ecosystem. Freshwater is so called because of its extremely low salt content. It exists in various forms such as lakes, rivers, ponds, swamps, or wetlands. The study of the physical, chemical, and biological properties of freshwater is referred to as limnology. Freshwater ecosystems are characterized as having running water, photic ecosystem, or still water, lentic ecosystem. Lentic ecosystems such as lakes and ponds like the sea scenes are divided into separate zones which are defined by their distance from the shore. The littoral zone, which is closest to the shore, is host to a wide variety of rooted plant species due to its warm, shallow environment. The limnetic zone is the open water near the surface waters farther from shore in a lake or pond. The deeper region of a lake or pond is called the profundal zone. Sun. _plus. Limnetic zone, STI, TLX, *HY. Prefundal zone. Benthic zone. Figure 7.18. Figure 7.18. The zones as lake water is determined by gradients of light from the water surface to the bottom. Life Sciences Admin. Ecology. Wetlands. Wetlands are ecosystems in which the land surface is saturated or covered with standing water at least part of the year and vegetation is adapted for growth under saturated conditions. Three major components used to determine the presence of wetlands are hydrology or wetness, type of vegetation, and type of soil. Freshwater wetlands occur in shallow waters, usually having pronounced seasonal variations of water depth, sometimes including dry periods during which water does not occur at the surface. The major types of wetlands are marsh, swamp, and bogs. Marshes are the most productive wetlands without trees, and are typically dominated by relatively tall, emergent species of angiosperm plants and by floating leaf plants. Swamps are forested wetlands, seasonally or permanently flooded, and dominated by trees. Bogs are acidic, unproductive wetlands that develop in relatively cool but wet climates. Bogs depend on atmospheric inputs for their supply of nutrients, and are typically dominated by species of moss. Biomes. Biomes are large, regional groupings of plants and animals discernible at a global scale. Their distribution patterns are strongly correlated with regional climate patterns and identified according to the climax vegetation type. However, a biome is composed not only of the climax vegetation, but also of associated successional communities, persistent subclimax communities, fauna, and soils. Thus the biome concept embraces the idea of community, of interaction among vegetation, animal populations, and soil and may be defined as a major region of distinctive plant and animal groups well adapted to the physical environment of its distribution area. Table 7.3. Major terrestrial biomes of the world, dominant growth forms and general climatic conditions. Gymnosperms. Biome dominant growth form dominant temperature moisture tropical rainforest broadleaved evergreen trees angiosperms hot wet tropical deciduous forest broadleaved deciduous and semi-angiosperms hot seasonally. Evergreen trees dry thorn forest broadleaf deciduous trees angiosperms hot dry tropical woodland broadleaf semi-evergreen trees angiosperms hot moderate and grasses. Temperate deci. Deciduous forest broadleaf deciduous trees angiosperms seasonally moderate. Cold. Temperate rainforest needle-leaved or broad tilde ave gymnosperms are various. Evergreen trees angiosperms temperate woodland needle-leaved or evergreen or broad both mild moderate. Leaved deciduous trees and grasses taiga, boreal forest, needle-leaved evergreen trees gymnosperms cold moderate temperate shrubland evergreen shrubs, annual forbs angiosperms mild moderate temperate grassland perennial grasses angiosperms seasonal moderate tropical savanna perennial grasses angiosperms hot moderate hot desert shrubs, succulents, annual and angiosperms hot dry. Perennial grasses, annual forbs cold desert shrubs angiosperms mild dry alpine shrubland deciduous shrubs angiosperms cold moderate alpine grassland perennial grasses angiosperms cold moderate tundra perennial grasses, sedges angiosperms cold moderate 399. Life Sciences Admin. Ecology. 90 degrees. Tundra. Temperate. Increasing aridity. Figure 7.19, simplified diagram of the relationship between precipitation and latitude in Earth's major land biomes. Adapted from Environmental Science, Botkin and Keller, John Wiley and Son, Inc. 7.3 Populate Ion Ecolog Y. In ecological term, a population is a group of individuals of the same species, inhabiting the same area, and functioning as a unit of biotic community. For example, all individuals of the common grass, Cynodon, in a given area constitute its population. However, in genetics, a population is a group of interbreeding individuals of the same species. Populations of different species are not capable of breeding with each other. Population can also be defined at various spatial scales, i.e., focal, mesoscale and regional. Local population, also termed as demes, are the smallest collective group or unit of interbreeding individuals. Local populations occupy very small habitat like a temporary pool of water or small field. A set of local populations connected by dispersing individuals is known as metapopulation. Population characteristics. A population has several characteristics or attributes which is a function of the whole group and not of the individual. Different populations can be compared by measuring these attributes. These attributes are population density, natality, mortality, growth forms, etc. The study of the group characteristics or parameters of the population, their changes over time and prediction of future changes is known as demography. 1. Population density. The size of the population is represented by its fundamental property called density. Density is expressed as the total number of individual per unit area or volume at a given time. Two types of densities are described: crude density, it is the density per unit total space, and specific ecological density, it is the density per unit of habitat space, i.e., available area or volume that can actually be colonized by the population. A.N. Life Sciences. L_ecology. 2. Natality. Natality is the ability of individuals of a population to produce new individuals. Natality rate is equivalent to the birth rate in the terminology of human population study demography. Maximum, sometimes called absolute or physiological, natality is the theoretical maximum production of new individuals under ideal environmental conditions, i.e., no ecological limiting factors, and is a constant for a given population. Ecological or realized natality refers to population increase under an actual or specific environmental condition. It is not a constant for a population but may vary with the size and age composition of the population and the physical environmental conditions. Natality is generally expressed as a rate determined by dividing the number of new individuals produced by time, absolute or crude natality rate, or as the number of new individuals per unit of time per unit of population, the specific natality rate. I3. Mortality. Mortality refers to death of individuals in the popula, IIN. Mortality is equivalent to death rate in human demography. Like natality, mortality may be expressed as the number of individuals dying in a given period, deaths per time. Ecological or realized mortality is the loss of individuals, under a given environmental condition. Like ecological natality, it is not a constant but varies with population and environmental conditions. A theoretical minimum mortality, a constant for a population, represents the loss under ideal or non-limiting conditions. Information of the death and survivor of a population with respect to age is represented in the form of table known as life table. What is really vital for the population is not which members die, but which member survives. Consequently, specific mortality rate of a population is expressed by survivorship curve. Survivorship curves plot the number of surviving individuals to a particular age. Survivorship curves are of three general types. A highly convex curve, type 1, is characteristic of the species in which the population mortality rate is low until near the end of the lifespan. Many species of large animals such as deer, mountain sheep and man, show such curves. A highly concave curve, type 3, is characteristic of those species where mortality rate is high during the young stages. Oysters or shellfish show this type of curve. In oysters, mortality is extremely high during free-swimming larval stages, but once an individual is well established on a favorable substrate, life expectancy improves considerably. In type 2 curve, which falls between type 1 and 3, the rate of mortality is constant at all age groups, so that an individual's chance of living another year is just as good at one age as another. This curve is typical of several birds and of human beings exposed to poor nutrition and hygiene. 10,004 pay, 40. 2. Cent 1007 figure, 7.20. E3 main types of survivorship curves. S10 plus in type 1 curve, most of the mortality occurs towards the end of the life. In type 2 age G14 specific survival remains constant. In type 3 Z type 3 curve mortality is very high during the young. 0.1 stages. Age. 4. Dispersion. Dispersion refers to the spatial and temporal distribution pattern of individuals of a population. Individuals in a population may be distributed in three broad patterns: regular, random and clumped, aggregated or contagious. 401. Life Sciences Admin. Ecology. In the case of regular dispersion, the individuals are more or less spaced at equal distance from one another. This is rare in nature but is common in managed systems like croplands. In random dispersion, the position of one individual is unrelated to the positions of its neighbors. This kind of distribution occurs where environment is very uniform and there is no tendency to aggregate. This is also relatively rare in nature. In clumped dispersion, most populations exhibit this kind of dispersion, individuals aggregated into groups of varying size. 5. Age structure. It is obvious that individuals in a population will be of different age groups. Relative numbers of young and old individuals in a population will significantly influence the behavior of a population, such as natality and mortality. The proportion of individuals in each age group is called age structure of that population. Age distribution influences both natality and mortality of the population. The ratio of the various age groups in a population determines the current reproductive status of the population. The age structure of any population can be classified into three categories, i.e., pre-reproductive, reproductive and post-reproductive ages. Can be classified into three categories, i.e., pre-reproductive, reproductive and post-reproductive ages. The relative duration of these age groups in proportion to the lifespan varies greatly with different organisms. In man, the three ages are relatively equal in length. Age pyramids. The easiest and convenient way to represent age distribution in a population is to arrange the data in the form of age pyramid. An age pyramid is vertical bar graph in which the number or proportion of individuals in various age groups at any given time, i.e., age pyramids is a model representing geometrically the proportions of different age groups in the populations of any organisms. There are three types of hypothetical age pyramids, which are as follows. Expanding population. In a rapidly growing population, birth rate is high and population growth may be exponential, as in the case of the housefly, yeast, and alga considered previously. Under these conditions, each successive generation will be more numerous than the preceding one. As a result, a pyramid-shaped age structure results. Stable population. As the rate of growth slows and stabilizes, the pre-reproductive and reproductive age groups become more or less equal in size. The post-reproductive groups remains as the smallest. The graphic representation of this stabilized population is that of a bell-shaped. Diminishing population. If the birth rate is drastically reduced, the pre-reproductive group dwindles in proportion to the reproductive and post-reproductive groups, resulting in an urn-shaped age structure. This is representative of a population that is dying off. Post-reproductive. Reproductive pre-reproductive. M.I.E. Figure 7.21. Age structure of different types of populations. I. Expanding population indicating a high percentage of young individuals in a population. E. Stable population indicating moderate proportion of young to old individuals. E. Diminishing population indicating a low number of young individuals. 402. Life Sciences Admin. Ecology. Population dispersal. A population is inherently dynamic in nature since individuals are always leaving or entering the populations. But such changes normally do not affect the size of a population. Population dispersal is the movement of individuals into or out of the population or the population area. It occurs in three following ways. Emigration, one-way outward movement of individuals from an area. Immigration, one-way inward movement of individuals into an area. Migration, periodic departure and return of individuals to same area. Population growth form. A population is a changing entity. Populations have characteristic patterns of increase called population growth forms. For comparison, two basic patterns based on the shapes of arithmetic plots of growth curves can be designated, the shaped growth form and the S-shaped or sigmoid growth form. In the J-shaped form, density increases rapidly in exponential fashion and then stops abruptly as environmental resistance or another limit becomes effective more or less suddenly. This form may be represented by the simple model based on the exponential equation. dn. IRn with a definite limit on n. The r in this equation is called the intrinsic rate of natural increase. The above equation describes the exponential or geometric growth pattern of population. In geometric growth, rate of increase is expressed as a constant fraction or exponent by which a particular population is multiplied, like 2, 4, 8, 16. By contrast, a pattern of growth that increases at a constant amount per unit of time, i.e., 1, 2, 3, 4, 0 R1, 3, 5, 7, is called arithmetic growth. The integral form of the exponential growth equation is n equals n, where n equals population density after time t. N equals population density at time 0. R equals intrinsic rate of natural increase. E equals the base of natural logarithms. In the sigmoid form, the population increases slowly at first, establishment or positive acceleration phase, then more rapidly, perhaps approaching a logarithmic phase, but it soon slows down gradually as the environmental resistance increases in percentage, the negative acceleration phase, until equilibrium is reached and maintained. This type of population growth is Khalid-Verhulst prologistic growth and described by following simple logistic equation. dn kn cent at equals k, where n equals population size. dn, s and change in population size per unit time. K equals carrying capacity. Intrinsic rate of natural increase. 1 403. Life Sciences Admin. Ecology. The upper level, beyond which no major increase can occur, as represented by the constant K, is the upper asymptote of the sigmoid curve and has been aptly called the maximum carrying capacity. The maximum value of R is often called by the less specific but widely used expression biotic potential or reproductive potential. ELE equals RL, LK equals N dt. J-shaped. NO. OF. INDI versus IDUALS NO. OF. INDI versus IDUALS. Time. When responses are limiting. The growth plot is logistic. Time. When responses are not limiting. The growth plot is exponential. Carrying capacity and biotic potential. No population can grow exponentially for long. So the level beyond which no major increase can occur represents the saturation level or carrying capacity, which is represented by letter K. It is the number of individuals of a particular species that a particular environment can support indefinitely. Accordingly, such type of population growth can be explained by following logistic equation, and the curve plotted is called phlogistic curve. The term indicates how much of the resources are still available to populations. When n is much dn test than k, the term ktj becomes approximately 1 and the equation becomes it equals rn, equation 4. dn exponential growth. As n almost becomes equal to k, the term e underscore n is almost 0 n, i.e., the growth rate also becomes 0. Carrying capacity is determined by various factors including predation, competition and climatic conditions. All factors which limit a population growth are collectively known as the environmental resistance to population growth. Since such factors are many and varied, it is clear that the carrying capacity of any area for a population may vary over a period of time. Biotic potential. Biotic potential or maximum reproductive potential is the inherent property of an organism to reproduce, to survive, i.e., to increase in number. Biotic potential differs from one species to another, e.g., bacterial populations can grow faster than population of oak trees. The rate of reproduction of any individual can be increased in any or all of three following ways. By producing a large number of offsprings each time it reproduces, by having a long reproductive life, and by reproducing as early in life as possible. Life Sciences Admin. LB. T. By. Ecology. LB. T. By. R. R. RICEPREII. 1Y. E. ETY. RS. AN. OT. T. 7.4 Biotic community. A community is a group of populations that coexist in space and time and interact with one another directly or indirectly. This definition of community includes all plants, animals, fungi, bacteria, and other organisms living in an area. Main features of community. First, a community represents the biotic or living component of the ecosystem. Secondly, considering the functional aspect, communities are made up of organisms with interlocking food chains, and each species depends on many other species in a community which are taxonomically unrelated. Thirdly, a community may be of any size. Community gradient and boundaries. It is often difficult to determine where one community ends and the next begins. Many communities grade continuously into each other with no sharp boundaries. For example, if two forests, pine forest and spruce forest, are nearby, one cannot see the boundaries between them. There are, however, instances where sharp boundaries between the communities are seen, especially where the physical environment changes abruptly, for example, at the transition between aquatic and terrestrial habitats. Ecotone. The zone of vegetation separating two different types of communities is called ecotone. 1T is also known as a transition zone. Ecotone is a region where the influence of two different patterns of environment works together, and hence the vegetation of ecotones is highly specialized. An ecotone may be narrow or wide. A general characteristic of ecotone is that it has sufficiently greater number of species and high diversity as compared to the neighboring communities. The phenomenon of increased variety of plants at the boundary is called the edge effect and is essentially due to wider range of suitable environmental conditions. Community classification based on metabolism. Howard Odum, 1956, classified ecosystems based on community metabolism, on the ratio of photosynthesis P to respiration R. According to this scheme, a stabilized system is one in which the ratio of photosynthesis to respiration is unity, that is, where PR equals 1. A system in which photosynthesis exceeds respiration, PR greater than 1, is considered autotrophic, and one in which respiratory demand exceeds photosynthesis, that is, PR less than 1, is said to be heterotrophic. In the autotrophic system, biological fertility is based on current production. In the heterotrophic system, it is based on part production, organic matter accumulated over a period of time and often imported from another ecosystem. Communify complexity and stability. Complexity is a function of the number of interconnections among community elements. Complexity increases as the number of interacting species in the community increases. These interactions can be horizontal, such as competitive interactions which tend to occur among species at the same trophic level, or vertical, between trophic levels. Stability involves two components: resilience, the ability of a community to return to its original state quickly following displacement, and resistance, the ability to avoid displacement. Intuitively, complex communities are considered stable, because the impact of sudden population change in one species will be cushioned by the large number of interacting species and will not produce drastic effects in the community as a whole. For example, a forest ecosystem with large biotic community can resist a fire better than a grassland ecosystem with smaller biotic community. Resistance is also associated with the dominance of K-selected and resilience with R-selected species. For example, a burned grassland community can quickly 405 lb t when responses are not limiting. The growth plot is exponential. Carrying capacity and biotic potential. No population can grow exponentially for long. So the level beyond which no major increase can occur represents the saturation level or carrying capacity, which is represented by letter K. It is the number of individuals of a particular species that a particular environment can support indefinitely. Accordingly, such type of population growth can be explained by following logistic equation, and the curve plotted is called phlogistic curve. The term indicates how much of the resources are still available to populations. When n is much dn less than k, the term ktj becomes approximately 1 and the equation becomes it equals Rn, equation 4. dn exponential growth. As n almost becomes equal to k, the term e underscore n is almost 0n. i.e., the growth rate also becomes 0. Carrying capacity is determined by various factors including predation, competition and climatic conditions. All factors which limit a population growth are collectively known as the environmental resistance to population growth. Since such factors are many and varied, it is clear that the carrying capacity of any area for a population may vary over a period of time. Biotic potential. Biotic potential or maximum reproductive potential is the inherent property of an organism to reproduce, to survive, i.e., to increase in number. Biotic potential differs from one species to another. E.g., bacterial populations can grow faster than population of oak trees. The rate of reproduction of any individual can be increased in any or all of three following ways. By producing a large number of offsprings each time it reproduces, by having a long reproductive life, and by reproducing as early in life as possible. Life Sciences Admin. LB. T. By. R. R. RICEPREII. 7.4 Biotic community. A community is a group of populations that coexist in space and time and interact with one another directly or indirectly. This definition of community includes all plants, animals, fungi, bacteria, and other organisms living in an area. Main features of community. First, a community represents the biotic or living component of the ecosystem. Secondly, considering the functional aspect, communities are made up of organisms with interlocking food chains, and each species depends on many other species in a community which are taxonomically unrelated. Thirdly, the community may be of any size. Community gradient and boundaries. It is often difficult to determine where one community ends and the next begins. Many communities grade continuously into each other with no sharp boundaries. For example, if two forests, pine forest and spruce forest, are nearby, one cannot see the boundaries between them. There are, however, instances where sharp boundaries between the communities are seen, especially where the physical environment changes abruptly, for example, at the transition between aquatic and terrestrial habitats. Ecotone. The zone of vegetation separating two different types of communities is called ecotone. 1T is also known as a transition zone. Ecotone is a region where the influence of two different patterns of environment works together, and hence the vegetation of ecotones is highly specialized. An ecotone may be narrow or wide. A general characteristic of ecotone is that it has sufficiently greater number of species and high diversity as compared to the neighboring communities. The phenomenon of increased variety of plants at the boundary is called the edge effect and is essentially due to wider range of suitable environmental conditions. Community classification based on metabolism. Howard Odum, 1956, classified ecosystems based on community metabolism, on the ratio of photosynthesis P to respiration R. According to this scheme, a stabilized system is one in which the ratio of photosynthesis to respiration is unity, that is, where PR equals 1. A system in which photosynthesis exceeds respiration, PR greater than 1, is considered autotrophic, and one in which respiratory demand exceeds photosynthesis, that is, PR less than 1, is said to be heterotrophic. In the autotrophic system, biological fertility is based on current production. In the heterotrophic system, it is based on part production, organic matter accumulated over a period of time and often imported from another ecosystem. Communify complexity and stability. Complexity is a function of the number of interconnections among community elements. Complexity increases as the number of interacting species in the community increases. These interactions can be horizontal, such as competitive interactions which tend to occur among species at the same trophic level, or These interactions can be horizontal, such as competitive interactions which tend to occur among species at the same trophic level, or vertical, between trophic levels. Stability involves two components: resilience, the ability of a community to return to its original state quickly following displacement, and resistance, the ability to avoid displacement. Intuitively, complex communities are considered stable, because the impact of sudden population change in one species will be cushioned by the large number of interacting species and will not produce drastic effects in the community as a whole. For example, a forest ecosystem with large biotic community can resist a fire better than a grassland ecosystem with smaller biotic community. Resistance is also associated with the dominance of K-selected and resilience with R-selected species. For example, a burned grassland community can quickly. 405. Life Sciences Admin. IJT-LSI. Recover to its original state, but a burned forest may take hundreds of years to recover or may not recover at all to its original condition. Community characteristics. Each biotic community possesses ecological characteristics which differentiate it from other communities. Species composition. Communities may be large or small. In each community there are diverse species. All these species are not equally important, but there are only a few overtopping species which by their number and growth modify the habitat and control the growth of other species of the community. These species are called the dominants. Dominant species are highly successful in a particular habitat. Generally in most of the communities, only a single species, due to being particularly conspicuous, is dominant, and in such case the community is called by the name of dominant species, as for example, spruce forest community. In other community there may be more than one dominant species. Keystone species. When the activity of a species determines community structure in spite of their low abundance or biomass, that species is called keystone species. Term keystone species was introduced by Payne. Keystone species plays a vital role in controlling the relative abundance of other species. The loss of a keystone species can lead to sharp population drops and extinction of other species that depend on it for certain services and causes serious disruption in the functioning of the community. African elephant is an example of keystone species. By their feeding habits, elephants destroy shrubs and small trees and push woodland habitats towards open grassland. As more grasses invade the woodland habitats, the frequency of fires increases, which accelerates the conversion of woods to grassland. Species diversity. It is one of the most important and basic characteristics of a community. There are various ways of measuring species diversity. The simplest is to enumerate the number of species present in a given area. This is relatively easy to achieve for plants and larger sedentary animals, but it is generally difficult to enumerate the various insect species accurately. A community can be characterized by its diversity, which is a function of the number of different species it contains and their abundance. Diversity depends on species richness, the total number of species, and on the evenness or equitability of species abundance. Communities in which a phase or all more or less equal in abundance exhibit evenness, whereas communities with one or a few abundant species and many rare ones show dominance. U.I. V, phi, O xylot EET4 EDLU 5 equals NN. 2 equals NB22. OBO copyright and 2 equals ARIK, minus 1 FLB. Equals 5 WH. BMZI. Species rank high evenness low dominance high dominance. Figure 7.22, 2 hypothetical dominance diversity distributions with the same species richness. Figure 7.22, 2 hypothetical dominance diversity distributions with the same species richness, 5 but different levels of species evenness. 406. Life Sciences Admin. ECOIOYY. Nature and structure of community. The community characters mainly are of two types, analytic and synthetic. Analytic characters are categorized as qualitative and quantitative. Qualitative characters are difficult to measure. Some important qualitative characters include stratification, physiognomy, periodicity, vitality and others. Whereas quantitative characters includes frequency, density, cover, biomass etc. Synthetic characters includes presence, constants and fidelity. Stratification. Both the life and growth form of plants emphasize height. A plant community conveys differences in the heights, or stratification, of the components. Trees are generally taller than shrubs, which are usually taller than herbs, and the latter taller than mosses and lichens. Tropical forests are characterized typically by a marked vertical stratification. Stratification results in the upper strata, or canopy, receiving a larger proportion of solar energy, and in instances of particularly dense foliage, little sunlight reaches the ground, reducing photosynthesis and plant growth at that level. O-stratification is also seen in the underground plant parts, that is the root and the rhizome systems. Root systems of different plant species tap moisture and nutrients from different soil depths.